to you is that when I say, and this was a bit of a diversion, but going back to the main point, when I say we can rationalize the existence of God and so on, I think that that can be done in the mind and in the real world, using both ways. Okay, so it's kind of like mathematics. Do you see what I'm trying to say? It's kind of like mathematics, but it's also like science. So you can have both. So when we talk about discursive rationalization, because when we say rationality or reason, what do we actually mean? There must be a method of finding out something, right? I'm saying that when we reason, we arrive at the fact that there's one God, and that independent God caused to exist everything that is in existence, and also as an extension of that, he's ascribed purpose to that human being. And that was the discussion that we were then having.
Yeah. But you're saying this God didn't have a cause.
Yeah, it was so causation, by the way. I'm going to throw away the word causation. Pretend I didn't say it, because with these discussions, I mean, usually when I'm talking to an atheist, I'm not saying you're one of them. I don't know what your disposition is, but there's obsessions with certain things like infinity, causation, and stuff. So forget about it. Depends on, right? Everything depends upon it.
Right, but it doesn't depend on anything else.
Yeah, it doesn't depend on anything else.
So you've decided to just kind of stop at God. You don't want to go further back from God.
There's no back and forward when we're talking about dependency and contingency, because the discussion of time is a very complicated philosophical discussion. I try and keep away from it by not even mentioning it, or mentioning that which depends upon it. So when I say that something depends upon something, that can do so independent of time. So yeah, everything depends upon, and you know the argument, I've put it to you before, right? I said to you, look, have we got a pen and a paper? Have we got a pen and a paper?
We've got a pen and a paper.
Let me get my notes out, yeah? I got this, brother got me a phone, mashallah, because I lost my phone in Malaysia. All right. How do I make the pen work? All right, okay. Yes? So here, you've got a series, yeah? This is a series. Let's say, call it series 1, yeah? S1. Yeah, let me show the cameras so they can see what we're talking about. S1, yeah? All right. Now, here, you've got the things that exist that are in existence. Say, for example, you have, like, let's call it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah? Are you with me on this? Yeah? These are all things that are in existence. Yeah? Can you see? All right. Now, there's two options. For the sake of argument, I don't even believe in infinity in the real world. But let's say, for the sake of argument, this goes on to infinity. Yeah? This goes on to infinity. Yeah? Can you see? Everyone can see. Yeah? Infinity. Now, really you have two options. If everything of those things, 1, 2, 3, and so on, or A, B, C, whatever, right? If they're all dependent things, if 1 is dependent, 2 is dependent, 3 is dependent, 4 is dependent, 5 is dependent, and they're all dependent on each other, you literally only have two options, yes? Option 1. And when we say dependent, I'm talking about dependent for existence, yeah? So in other words, 1 is dependent on 2 for its existence, 2 is dependent on 3 for its existence, and so on. You have two options. Either the series is dependent on itself. Yes? That's option 1. Option 2 is that the series is dependent upon something which is outside of the series, which is independent, so everything depends upon that series, on that independent. These are the only two logical options. There's no third. In fact, I'll challenge you, anyone, right?
Okay. Isn't there a possibility of there's an infinite series that depend on each other?
Yeah, that's why we said there's two things, right?
Yeah.
Either the series itself has an infinite amount of things which are dependent on each other, and the thing itself becomes independent from that, or it depends upon something outside which is independent. There's no other options. Let me give you an easy example, right? Say, for example, we have phones. We have mobile phones.
I understand you.
Yeah, but just for everyone else, right? I know you understand. But say we've got phones, yeah? So you have one phone, you have two phones, you have three phones, yeah? What do phones require in order to operate? Electricity, power, energy, and so on. We agree, yeah? So if we have three phones that all require energy to be powered, in this analogy, power or energy will represent existence, okay? In this analogy. So if we have three phones that require power in order to exist, either if I put three phones together, yes, if I put three phones together, What will happen after 24 hours? And I connect them all to each other. What will happen after 24 hours? They all die out, isn't it? So they all die out. Why? Because the energy resource has been depleted, isn't it? We all agree. There's no difference of opinion. So, in this analogy, in the universe, in existence, there are things which, let's say, that they depend upon each other. If there is no external source, if you like, which is not dependent on anything, then nothing will exist. Does that make sense?
I dispute one part of that.
There's one disputation. Can I say it before you say it?
You could try. It might not be the thing I'm thinking.
If there's an infinite amount of those things, you could argue they can be self-powered. In this analogy, if there's an infinite amount of phones, that's one argument, which is why I said there's only two ways you can go.
It wasn't what I was going to say.
All right, go on.
It was that. So let's say we've got this. We have
Yes.
we have this series,
Yes.
and it needs something outside of its realm
Right.
to create it. It's dependent upon that. Okay. Now the force outside of it. How do we know for certain that that is not dependent on something else?
It's by necessity.
But why is it? Why is it necessitated? I don't
So it's
know.
ontologically necessary,
Why?
as well as cosmologically. Why? Because let me tell you why it's necessary. It's impossible to have existence without it. So, for example, in our analogy of the mobile phones, if we have 3 mobile phones and they're all connected to each other, it's impossible to conceive that those 3 mobile phones will continue being powered for 1,000 years. And in the same thing,
I don't know. There's energy in the universe, and it stays. It doesn't. There's no energy is not created or destroyed.
That's in a closed
here.
circuit.
Right, but that's what we're saying. It's a closed system.
Yeah, okay, even if you say it's a closed system, but the closed system of the universe, someone might argue about multiverse, right?
Oh, sure.
And if the universe had an inception, then there was a time where energy didn't exist, and now then it became existent. So,
Well, unless the universe didn't have an inception.
pardon? Yeah, so
always existed.
that's fine. If you say that the universe always existed, which is obviously, for the sake of argument, unscientific, right? Then you can make the argument that everything exists within the universe, or everything is dependent on it. So that universe becomes independent, if you like. You still have to say that there's one independent. If the series does not have one independent, existence would not be possible.
No, it might do.
How?
But I'm saying it's the next tier.
If the system does not have one independent, existence would not be possible. If you say the series is independent, then the series is independent.
It's assuming that it will last forever.
But you see, look, you have
Maybe the force outside it won't last forever.
there's 2 options, right? Either the series with the infinite amount of phones is the independent. The series itself is independent, right? Or there's something outside of the series which is independent, which the series depends upon. In both cases, you have what? You have the independent. And all we're saying as Muslims is there is an independent, one independent entity. That's the first point. Once you've acknowledged that the independent is there, then we ask the question: the series itself, is it made up of parts? If you say the series itself is made up of parts, I have an argument to make. I'll say that everything which is generated is a compound is generated.
Let's say you're right. I have a question. What's the only thing that you know to be true? What's the only thing you can know to be the case, to exist?
I exist here.
What is the only thing?
Pardon?
You understand me? Nobody understand me?
No.
The only thing that you can know exists is that you have a point of awareness. That's it.
That's the pinnacle of certainty, isn't it?
Well, that's all you got. That's all we got. Everything else can easily be an illusion. And
Yeah,
we've got. So why is that awareness not God?
Okay, no problem.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get it.
That infinite force that's created all.
But now we're talking about the attributes of God rather than his existence or not. So we've kind of crossed the bridge now in that case.
Well, I'm saying that your point of awareness might be God.
Okay.
That's my point.
No
I don't
problem.
see why
Yeah,
not.
I agree with that.
Terminology thing.
Yeah, no problem. I don't have a problem with that.
I don't
not-
really
it's not
understand
only-
the necessity
All right.
explanation.
Okay, look. If you have 5 phones, is it necessary for there to be an outside power for all of them to be continually generated?
You mean like in electricity? Like
Yes.
electricity, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine. If every power source depended upon another power source ad infinitum, then what would we have?
And you're saying that in Islamically that's God.
No, we're saying that there must have been an independent thing outside of this series, which everything in that series depend on. Now, you could argue, the only argument that can be made,
Unless it has always existed.
what has always, we're not talking about time here, okay? This is not about temporality. It could be related to time or not. It's nothing to do with time.
It's not. It has nothing to do with time.
Yeah.
Did you understand the example I gave?
About higher planes.
Now, the reason why I would say one more thing. Now, the reason why in that series, an infinite amount of things cannot exist and be dependent upon each other that way, is every compound is a generated thing. The series in this case is a compound, therefore the series is a generated thing. In effect, what I'm telling you is everything with parts is necessarily dependent on those parts. If the series, if we take out one of those things, in the series, then the question is the dependency the same? Dependency is not the same. So we require one thing, okay? We require one independent, which is immaterial, not composed of parts.
Yeah, your awareness.
You could call it awareness, but for me, you've just referenced God in another language. You've just called God the awareness. You can call him that if you want.
But you're not subservient to it. That's my point.
Well, you absolutely are subservient, because if you depend upon it, then you're subservient to it by definition.
Why are you not creating it right now? Why are you not a spontaneous point of
creating
view?
is different.
Why would you be? Why would you want to be subservient?
It's not about wanting. It's about the fact that you are.
Okay, but in that case, then let's say if
you're a Muslim by virtue of existence, which means you submit yourself to God, but you're not a Muslim by virtue of will. That's the only thing that you need to do now. Do you know what I mean? The only thing you need to recognize is the fact that you're already submissive.
Yeah, but the way you've explained it, if this is God, the way you've explained it, it seems like this is an extremely distant entity. It seems like this is an extremely distant, inconsequential entity. Because the God that you worship is the God that requires 5 times a prayer a day, the Hajj,
interventionist.
Exactly, yeah. So it doesn't. It sounds like almost it's a different God you're talking about.
No, because these attributes that I've described, I've said to you, are not exhaustive.
You could believe in that God without having to pray 5 times a day or grow the beard, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. But that is a starting point for us. The list of attributes that we've just outlined is not exhaustive but suggestive, right? So in other words, those attributes, the oneness, the independence, and so on, immateriality and incorporeality, and the fact that he doesn't have parts and so on, these are necessary understandings of what God is. But they're not exhaustive understandings. We say that, I agree, and I've always said this to you, right? That you cannot rationalize every attribute of God through discursive rationalization. But once you rationalize 4 or 5 of those attributes, you leave atheism aside.
But 4 or 5, is that enough for you?
Absolutely.
Really?
No, it's not enough for me. It's enough to it's enough to do away with the atheistic thesis. You can no longer call yourself an atheist and believe in an independent, incorporeal, immaterial entity that everything depends upon. There's no way you can call yourself an atheist and believe in that. It does not work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in the initial phase, I'm saying that ontologically and cosmologically, it makes perfect logical sense to believe in this entity as a starting point. After that now, the question is, what is the relationship between us as human beings and this entity?
I don't see why it's external.
Yeah,
I'm following you. This is actually really interesting, man, for sure. Much better than the last time.
Okay.
I can't understand why this is an external entity. I can't understand why it's not just internal manipulations.
Or internal being generated by yourself.
We said why it can't be generated by yourself. But the reason why is because
you might be that force, the generative force.
It's impossible because we know.
I don't see why.
No, cosmologically, if you want to use that argument, right, we know we had an inception, right? We had a beginning. But
the universe can be switched on.
But even if we don't go down that route, we can say, but we know we're dependent. I mean, I had to drink a lot of drink today and eat a lot of
physically.
Food. Yeah.
But are you only physical?
Okay, so you're talking about the metaphysical aspect.
Yeah, for sure.
No problem. So here, we go back to our series. Okay, is our existence independent?
Which one? This illusionary physical?
Any existence.
Well, the physical one, sure.
If we say that do you believe in the existence of other minds and other people, or not?
It's a great question.
I don't think you could really ask that question.
I can give us a theory. Is that maybe there's one central point of awareness, and we're all manifestations of that possibility.
No, because you've started off with an isolated.
If that makes sense to anyone?
Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah.
No, because what he's done is he started off with an isolated self.
Right.
And
don't think-
when you have that starting point, then obviously you're going to start thinking about other minds and other people. But if you don't start off with that,
I think we're
well,
connected.
if you're not
Say that.
starting off from that point, then you don't really even need to ask that question.
I understand, but you understand that. You understand this, right? You understand that why we must be one independent and so on.
Mentally.
What?
When we're a child, we're relying on other minds, like the mother's mind to.
Yeah, but you're not even
but
aware of
he's
that.
at this point we haven't even gotten to the stage where he's accepting the mother's mind exists.
He's basically saying that it's all an illusion, right?
The physical is.
Well, that's what he's saying.
But that's not what we are.
That's what he's
I don't
saying.
think we're from here. I don't think we're part of this. I think it might be a simulation, an illusion.
That's not why. I
Yeah,
think.
but that's one option, but I don't think that's
But do you know what? Yeah, you're right. You know
Definitely
why?
not.
Because if sometimes when I speak to like atheists and agnostics, you're a very nice guy yourself. You're a very nice guy, right? You put on this ultra skeptic kind of.
I want to understand.
No, because it's not a matter of ultra skeptic.
I don't know.
It's your starting point.
And I'm happy with it. And I'm
Because
happy
you've
with it. I like
started
it.
off-
I personally like it. I enjoy it. But
No, because
the truth is, I want you to be honest with yourselves. Like, is
Pablo,
this
it's not
exactly
your
what?
turn.
Like, someone attacks you on the streets. I mean, are we going to have this ultra skeptic attitude? Are we going to go to the police with certainty that he slapped me, right? I mean, if you're fired from work on unjust grounds, and then all of those things happen to you on a daily basis that do happen to you, as I'm sure they do, right?
Everything-
Are we gonna really go through the same process?
Everything you're
I'm
describing.
gonna say,
is
my boss, I
pers-
don't know if he exists or not. You know?
No, because
Everything
it's
you're
not about
describing
that.
is
It's
from
not
your
about
senses,
that.
man.
That's
Yeah,
not about
yeah.
And we
I
don't
get it,
know
I
if
get
your
it.
senses are legit.
But would you use that interrogation if a crime was done against you or something happened to you in your life?
What people do.
There are
People do
different
all the time.
resolutions of analysis, aren't they? We're
Yeah, I
either
get it,
we're
I
either
get it,
going to
but-
contemplate the nature of existence, or we're going to say how do we live day by day. It's kind of different.
No, it's important because you got to ask us, and this is a question that's kind of outside of our philosophical discourse here.
Why?
But I
Oh,
wanna-
this one. Or
Yeah.
I thought you meant
No,
Islam.
he's
which
looking-
is
the-
that
the
question is
existence of an
why do we
external
apply
human
different
being.
standards of epistemic truth to different things? Like, for example, if you believe that your day-to-day life is worth living, then and your philosophical analysis here in this park is the correct kind of skepticism that you should have. It's the Goldilocks middle ground. if you
For
like.
myself it
for
is,
yourself.
but I'm not
Then
saying
why
to anyone
now?
else.
Why don't we apply this ultra skepticism to everything that happens to you in your life?
You don't need to.
you
That
do.
doesn't make sense.
Yeah, you do.
Oh, he's coming on my side, this guy.
Hello
Do you get it?
there.
I think
no,
what we need to do is we need to
Pablo.
get some food after, so we need to sit down with each other. I need to walk around a little bit.
This happens.
Is that all
This
right?
happens every time.
Because you know why?
Because as a religious person, you're stuck.
Happens
Am I
every
stuck?
time.
Am I stuck?
You're stuck.
Anyway,
You're
good
stuck.
conversation
Don't
anyway.
isolate
Good
yourself.
conversation.
No, you can continue with me if you think I'm stuck.
No, it's fine. I need to go eat.
I'm cool.
Okay, so you're hungry. we can eat together.
About
That's the last thing you
existence,
said.
man.
is
About
I'm
the nature of
stuck.
existence, about whether God is
Take care,
rational,
man.
if rationality exists.